Hello, Blenders. Welcome to episode number 158 of Real Blend, a podcast I can't believe they're actually going to call the sequel Face On. My name is Sean O'Connell, the managing editor here at Cinema Blend, and this week's show is jam-packed with information, including information about that Face Off sequel that's coming up, because we have Godzilla vs. Kong director Adam Wingard as our guest. We're also going to be talking about movie theaters opening soon, and we're going to be reviewing Nobody, the new film by Bob Odenkirk, doing his best. Well, I don't know what it is. Death Wish? Taken?
John Wick?
John Wick? It's a John Wick type riff-off? Well, we'll get to that point. We'll get to Bob Odenkirk in a second. Because first I have to introduce birthday boy Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hi, Kev.
Hello, Sean. Jacob. Gabriel. Good to see you guys.
Happy birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. Love you guys.
Belated. Yes, we're recording the day after Kevin's birthday. Send him love. And by we, I mean Jake Hamilton of Fox 32 in Chicago. Hi, Jakey. How are you?
Hello, handsome. How are you?
I'm doing well. We have, so for people who might have missed it, because this is the full show for this week, we had a bonus episode that ran on Monday that you should go out of your way to go
Sean,
find.
Who was on that bonus episode?
The director of Tom Petty's documentary, Somewhere You Will Feel... We need to boost her numbers up a little bit. Go check out her interview with us right after you see Zack Snyder, the director of Justice League and Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, as well as 300 and Watchmen, joined the Real Blend podcast. Some really great feedback from everybody on it. Seems people in the comments are truly digging it. A lot of people are sharing it. We are so thankful for you guys checking it out. We're so thankful for Zack to coming by. And I love the fact that, we were able to talk to him. We talked to him actually on the day that the Snyder Cut got released, which was really special for us. And it was really cool to have him on. So make sure you go check that out. It's over on our YouTube page. You can also download it where you get your podcast. If you're watching us on that YouTube page, as I mentioned, make sure you go down and hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. If you're listening to us on your podcast portals, go to the description to find out where to go for our YouTube channel. And of course, there's the Real Blend Premium, which we're always promoting as well, too. We drop bonus episodes of the show every Monday. You can go sign up for that at bit.ly/RealBlendPremium. Let's get to the weekly poll. I know we just have been talking about Snyder Cut for a really long time and the extension of Justice League, but we're ramping up for a movie that we're going to have some really interesting conversations about for the next couple of weeks. Godzilla vs. Kong. And I put it to our listeners, and I said, settle this fight. Who is going to win this battle? Godzilla or Kong? Jake, of all the people who voted, what direction do you think they went with the poll? Who is going to win this fight, this big screen epic extravaganza, Godzilla or Kong?
It seems like I was trying to think about the conversation that came out once the trailer was released, and it seemed like a majority of people were leaning toward, logistically speaking, that Godzilla would win. It seemed like there was maybe a want for Kong to win. Right. And I think that element comes from the fact that he's just a little bit more human. So I think he is more relatable in that sense. So it depends on how our audience voted, like how they thought, like, okay, like logistically speaking, like Godzilla's bigger and he's got fire breath, or if they went with their hearts. I think I'm going to say they chose Godzilla.
Okay, before I get to the results, you're right in that I've heard the comparison that almost ties it back to Batman vs. Superman, not to stay on Snyder, although we love Snyder, in that most people would argue like there's no possible way that Batman, who is a person, no matter how many gadgets he has, or how many things, would be able to defeat Superman, because Superman is just all powerful. And by comparison, Kong should not be able to beat Godzilla, because Godzilla is a massive creature. And not that Kong is a slouch. I'm not trying to dismiss him in any way, shape, or form. But you're right. It's people who are voting from their heart. And Godzilla did win. Godzilla got 52% of the vote, as opposed to Kong 48%. And a lot of people on social media asking, is there a clear-cut winner in this movie? And we can't review it yet, so we'll hold off on that conversation. Kev, are you surprised by the results?
No, I mean, I'm surprised how close it was. I agree that I think people want Kong to win because just, emotionally, Kong is a very interesting character. But no, I think Godzilla, I think at the end of the day, if you're looking at putting them up against each other, I think people are going to probably choose Godzilla. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I don't remember where either of you two are. Okay, taking this movie out of it, because we can't talk about it yet. Where do you rank the other three MonsterVerse movies that we've gotten so far? We have two Godzilla films and Kong Skull Island.
I'm gonna be honest
Island.
with you. Yeah.
And then down here,
Yeah.
Godzilla and King of the Monsters.
All right, but you both like Skull Island a lot.
Yeah, I think Skull Island,
Island's-
yeah, it's great.
Skull Island's amazing.
Yeah, it's like Apocalypse Now with a giant ape in it.
I saw someone on Twitter the other day. It made me really happy. There was something about like this universe of films. All the directors have like really good beards, and then you look at there was a photo of Jordan, the director of Kong Skull Island, this massive beard, and then as you just saw, or you're going to see in our Adam Wingard interview, or is it Wingard or Wingard? I don't know.
Wingard.
Okay.
Whatever Sean says, it's the opposite.
Yeah, he has an epic beard too. I thought it was really funny that both those filmmakers in the I don't know who directed Godzilla. Was that
some beardless hack?
No, it was
No, that was
Michael Dougherty. Michael Dougherty. Who
Dougherty
did
the second one.
Oh.
He did Godzilla, King
Gareth,
of Monsters.
Gareth,
the one who did
Gareth Evans, right? Gareth. No,
yes.
wait. Edwards.
Yeah.
There's
No,
two
you're
of
right,
them.
What was
you're
the movie he did, that monster film with that awesome...
It's called Monsters, I believe.
Is it called Monsters?
Yes,
That's pretty funny. Got him the gig?
That's what got him, yeah.
And then, of course, Rogue One, right? He sort of directed Rogue One, from what we believe. I kind of admire Millie Bobby Brown growing out a really long beard, too, just because she's in the universe. Yeah, I mean, it's commitment to the bit. Why don't we throw it right to somebody who really knows what they're talking about in terms of Godzilla versus Kong. We are really happy to have Adam Wingard on the show as a guest. Tremendous stories about the making of this film. Not quite spoilery. I think we avoid most of the spoiler talk. Gabe, you've listened to it, right?
Yeah, so I will say, so for our international audience, from what I gathered, you will be able to rent it starting this weekend, which is why we're dropping it now. But if you want to know nothing, then of course, hold this for later. But we don't get into anything that wasn't already a part of discussions surrounding the trailers and before release. And then, of course, some face-off stuff, which is great.
Well, without further ado, Adam Wingard on the Real Blend Podcast.
Seriously, thank you for joining us, Adam. We are the Real Blend Podcast, and we're sort of a film director-based pod. We love sort of diving in and getting into the intricacies of filmmaking. And so seriously, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
So I'm going to lead us off. A few months ago, I did an interview with Bruce Campbell, and I asked him why they never moved forward on Ash versus Freddy versus Jason. And he said that in the early planning stages, that there were just so many rules and regulations about what Ash could and could not do to Freddy and Jason. Like he couldn't hurt them too much. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. Like notes from all the studios about he was just so restricted. And I'm sort of curious, when you came into this, did you get notes about rules and restrictions about what Godzilla and Kong could and could not do to each other?
Not necessarily what they couldn't do to each other, but I will say Toho does have rules about how Kong can, or not Kong, but Godzilla can act in certain ways. Like, I can't remember if they ever gave us like a formal list, but I was definitely told, sometimes you're like, okay, we're going to do this. And then somebody's like, oh, Toho won't let you do that.
What would be an example of that?
Like one of them, for instance, is they don't want Godzilla to emote, like in terms of like, they see him as like this godlike force of nature. And so to them, it's out of character if you have him reacting in a normal way to things, right? But there was always ways around it. We definitely have some moments where I think Godzilla is more emotive in this film than he has been in any of the MonsterVerse movies, and we just had to get clever with it. And I think that sometimes that stuff is kind of presented to you in a very like brick wall kind of way. But if you just do certain things and present it to them just right, and if they're on board with the movie, they seem to give us plenty of leadway. We never actually had them say, you can't do this. There's one shot where we actually had some blood coming out of Godzilla at one point, and
cool.
And it actually like went all over the camera. It's actually still in the movie, but it's pared down, because I can't remember if that was actually directly Toho saying you can't do that, or if that was just somebody from Legendary being like, we're never going to get that through Toho. I can't remember which one it was, but I do remember we did 3 different versions of the shot, like most blood, least blood, But I was like, oh, it's cool to see Godzilla's blood. So I was just glad to do it.
So we're never going to get a scene where like Godzilla has a tear rolling down his cheek.
Well, not in a conventional way, but like I actually there's a couple shots in the film to me where Godzilla is smiling and laughing, and it's still interpretational, but I think people will be able to pick it out. I think I even talk about it in the audio commentary. So
in the release, the Adam cut of the film, there's going to be a moment where Godzilla breaks the fourth wall and talk fight to the audience. That's going to be amazing.
Like Cherry, but with Godzilla.
I like that Adam's like, I can't have Godzilla's blood, so I'm just gonna have Kong drink the blood of his dinosaur skull. Take that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Adam, I would love your films leading up to this, and I've been a huge fan of you coming through the years, and all of your films. I envision that like on the day you've completed filming, you're able to turn to your footage and process what you just saw, and know whether you got the shot or not. But on a film like this, as I'm watching it play out, and the scale is just so epic, and I'm thinking like, you might not see the finished product of a scene, months. It'll take months for the effects to get finished. What was that like adjusting to that, and just having the patience to know, like, how did you know in a movie like this that you got the shot that you needed?
Well, it's a bit nightmarish, as you're alluding to, because you like you said, like whenever you normally have a editor's cut or and especially a director's cut, which is your first kind of like 10 weeks that you have to do your first pass of the film, you always basically have the movie. You might have a couple shots here or there where you're like, okay, like, we're going to add more blood to this shot because we didn't get it quite on the day or something like that. But by and large, it's the movie, With this film, I remember like, my editor very early on, he was a really smart guy, Josh Schaefer. He worked a little bit on Kong. He worked a little bit on King of Monsters, and he's done a bunch of other movies. And he's a very smart guy because you're always playing a little bit of a game, when you're working with this much money. Like people are looking at you and they're nervous, and they don't know what you've done really. You don't know what you've done. And he was very smart because whenever he showed me the editor's cut, we were still a long ways off from having the VFX filled in. We had certain sequences like the ocean battle. We always had previs from the start. Mm-hmm. I mean, it fluctuated in size and stuff, but we kind of always knew what that sequence is. But there was large sections of the film that were still being kind of written as we were shooting it. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, like the Hollow Earth stuff, it's like, we had lots of concept art. We didn't actually know what Hollow Earth was at this point. You know what I mean? It was not defined yet because we didn't even have any previs on it because things kept changing. And, the previs was always more focused on the Godzilla and Kong fights. And so there's lots of like these large sections of the film where you just got like text on screen saying, this is going to happen here, and that kind of things. And going back to what my editor said, he was very smart. He when he showed me the editor's cut of the film, he said, look, he's like, it's gonna buy you so much with the studio if you show them a cut early, because as in the Directors Guild, you have, a mandatory like 10 weeks or whatever it is for your cut without any interference whatsoever. Right.
Oh, wow. I didn't know.
But,
that.
If you want, you can sneak a look to the producers, Right. And so, and at first I was like, go fuck yourself. There's no way that I'm going to show anybody anything early. Like I'm going to make myself look horrible if I do that. No way. I was like, I'm going to take all 10 weeks. And so here I am editing, for 6 weeks. And I've kind of done, because what I like to do, because customarily I've always edited my own films. Up until recently, I started working with editors, but I still always do a pass myself. So as soon as I finish a film, I sit down for, about 5 to 6 weeks by myself while the editor is doing other stuff. And I'm just doing my pass. I'm familiarizing myself with the footage and all that kind of stuff. And I'm doing totally my thing. Right. And so I got 6 weeks into it. And I took a look at it and I'm just like, you know what? Like there's so much of this film that's just not there.
Yeah.
And we've already got it down, pared down to 2 hours and 15 minutes or whatever. I knew that the movie was never going to be over 2 hours. So I kind of knew what my goal was, and I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. I was like, it's not like the movie's going to get drastically better, in the rest of the time we have left. And we're only going to get, by goodwill if we show something early. So that's what we did. We spent, a couple weeks working together. And then I think like 2 weeks early, we brought in our producers and said, okay, here secretly is where we're at. And, we want to bring you guys in on the process. And, you're always having to think about things kind of like that. You can't just like, like this piece of paper says I get 10 weeks, so go fuck yourself. It's like, you kind of shooting yourself in your foot sometimes if you get legalistic about things. You have to be realistic, and you have to know that they just want to help, and sometimes that can be scary, but like, you're all on the same team. You're all trying to make the best movie possible. And, it's trying to bring everybody together to make that happen. The second that you start creating a rivalry between yourself and the studio, that's where problems happen, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Adam,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was a really cool answer. It's cool. I love the inside elements of that. One thing I find interesting is your two leading characters are CGI, but they look incredible in the finished product. But I wonder two things. One, are there actors playing Godzilla and Kong in performance capture? And then two, for the actors, the human characters, Brian Tyree Henry was saying that there was laser pointers used on set for eye lines. So could you talk about kind of how you capture what Kong and Godzilla are doing? Do you have actors doing it? And then the human actors, what they're looking at specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it was a variety of different things. And, to be honest with you, it's really fascinating approach because as a director, funny enough, a lot of the times I didn't, I wasn't a part of the process of the day-to-day, how do you get the animation to look this way? Like my process was always, okay, here's the script. Okay, maybe the script's not that descriptive about the action, so we have to come up with the action. So it's me sitting with the storyboard artist, trying all kinds of different things, whittling it down, then giving that over to the previs or post-viz animation artists who are, really trying to get the angles, and the timing and stuff. And so they're working off the storyboards a bit, working off of discussions that I've had with my VFX supervisor, and then they start fleshing it out. And then we take it into editorial, we edit it into the movie. And then once we kind of start locking the picture, or at least something resembling locking the picture, because you have to get these things so far in motion before the movie's even close to being done that you just have to say, okay, this scene is done enough. Go ahead and get going on the next process. You try not to waste as much money as possible, because it just takes so long. Because then the next level of process is then, you get into more detailed animation, and then after that you get into the actual emotions of the monster. So you might have like a pass that gets all the angles and all the timing right, but there's no emotion in his face, and that's where like the motion capture stuff usually would be utilized at those levels. But I was never in the room for it. It was always through my VFX supervisor. This is what I want Godzilla to be doing. This is what I want Kong to be doing. And then you have to trust, just like you would your cinematographer or your actors, you have to trust them to bring something to you. You have to trust them as artists. And honestly, like if it was ever a situation where I felt like I wasn't getting what I wanted, I would have gotten more involved in that sense. But they just always had such a great intuitive sense of how to approach the emotions of the monsters. And they could always do it through simple dialogue that I had, with my VFX supervisor to them. And so that never ended up being too hard to get there. And as like the movie itself has a lot of emotions in the monsters, it's like, I think it's like the most emotions that you see in these monsters in this series. And so, to get there, it's just such a crazy process, but it just kind of works out weirdly because you're working with talented people and you trust them and you give them the ability to do their thing, And then in terms of on set, like, yeah, we used laser pointers. We used sound effects sometimes, like we had a PA system, and I would like play sound effects from E Squared, the company that does all the sound effects for the movie. And,
Cool.
that was something actually I kind of learned from Doherty. I was on set for King of Monsters for a couple days, and he had like a whole crazy setup, and like he had every scene it seemed like he had sound effects and stuff going on. And I would use the sound effects just when I needed the actors to kind of act violently to something, but sometimes I would play music if it was an emotional scene and they're having to work with Kong and I needed a specific thing, like I'd play music. And luckily Junkie XL had done some of the score.
God,
he's a genius.
Yeah, he's great. And so, he had already given me some stuff. So I was actually able to use some of his music on set to kind of just help the performances and those kind of things.
He gave you score for the film already, like while you were shooting? That's pretty rare, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always a way that I've tended to work, because I like to work with the composers ahead of time and have them at least give me some sort of suites, so that I can kind of at least calibrate sort of like the vibe of the movie to sort of what they're doing and vice versa. And it just gives me inspiration, really.
That's awesome.
And, and Junkie XL, I mean, he's just like, he's a madman. So he's ready to jump on it and, just get it done. And, he works like a machine,
Yeah. Great composer. Yeah.
Adam, the trailers for this film were incredible. In fact, I think they were like literally record breaking on YouTube. And there was one trailer that came out where basically if you go frame by frame, you can see very quickly Mechagodzilla. And instantly, like, the internet just went nuts because people started going, like, taking freeze frames and people started going, oh my God, is Mechagodzilla in the film? And people started going nuts. As a filmmaker, when a trailer comes out and, like, a little Easter egg is hidden in there, and then the internet just goes nuts and starts, like, posting the image of it, is there a part of you that's like, son of a bitch? Like, that's our big moment.
No, not at all. I mean, like, as a matter of fact, with that original trailer, one of the first things that I really appreciated about it is that it is that on one hand, it felt, like it was kind of giving you a straightforward idea of what the movie is, but it really didn't show very much of the film. There's so many different environments, all kinds of stuff that happens in the movie that it doesn't even allude to. But there's all these little hints that kind of play up, and I think that it was really smart because everybody knows nowadays that, when you release a trailer, it's going online. That's how people are experiencing things. And people are going to pick apart frame by frame. I mean, especially on a big, kind of IP property like this that has a built-in fan base, people are ready to dissect it. And with our film in particular, I mean, nobody knew what this film was for years. I mean, like you wouldn't believe the amount of Instagram DMs that I get from people like begging for the trailer, begging for anything. And, it's like, you want to give it to them, but you're just like, look, it's not time yet, and, nobody wants it out more than me, but that those people are just so ready that they're going to analyze everything, and they're going to have theories about what the movie's, what's going on in that scene, and they're going to break it down in full videos. And that was super fun for me to watch, just to see all the different theories and reactions to it in general.
Adam, I promise, the last Mechagodzilla question, because I know it's a lot of it that we want to protect, but I'm curious from this perspective. When you come to a project like this, are you able to say to them, I ultimately want to include Mechagodzilla and use him? Or when you arrive, do they say, like, okay, we're going to use Mechagodzilla, you better figure out how to make it work?
Well, I can't say anything directly about Mechagodzilla,
sure,
but I will say that.
Let's say if he were to be in this movie.
Yeah, I'll be like,
hypothetically.
You ever see that Ted Bundy documentary where they get Ted Bundy to talk about his murders by talking in the third person? It's like, that's what I have to do. I have to
the one on Netflix
to talk about.
OJ wrote a book. OJ Simpson wrote a book called If I Did It.
If I Did It. Yeah, exactly.
If I Did It.
If Mechagodzilla. No, what existed of this film before I came on was there was a writer's room that had been put together by Terry Rossio, who's a brilliant guy, and he so like there was like a 3 or 4 page outline, maybe it was longer, maybe it was shorter, I can't remember, and it was just sort of like a framework for what the movie could be. And so my process coming in was then sitting down with Terry for a couple sessions. And we just note carded the entire film. We like basically had 2 blackboards or 3 or whatever it was. And we went into one of the legendary boardrooms. They have really cool boardrooms with Godzilla artwork and stuff there, you know, and so you feel real fancy and stuff, you know. And by the way, like one of the first meetings I had with Terry, it was really funny because, you know, Terry, you know, he's been around for years. I mean, he helped write Aladdin, Shrek, Pirates of the Caribbean, you know. And so like one of the first meetings I had with him, we were in this big boardroom just by ourselves, huge boardroom. And he's like, you know, let's just take a minute. He's like, you just have to take a moment and look at this and just know it's like, we've fooled everybody into letting us into this room right now to do this.
We say that in every Zoom.
Yeah, we feel that basically about this job.
Yeah.
I bet, you know, so, you know, but, you know, so like we were able to go through the whole film and, you know, talk through every scene, develop every scene before he went into writing it. And we came up with a lot of really cool ideas that ended up in the movie. And, you know, so I was able to totally make it mine and, you know, put very much my own spin on it and all that kind of stuff. So that was cool.
That's awesome.
Adam, I've always found this fascinating, just in cinema in general, but especially in this film in particular. Anytime Kong is in distress or stressful situations, it's almost more anxiety-inducing than it is to watch human characters. And I don't mean that because the human characters in this film are great, but in general, in the scope of movies, I always feel like it's harder to watch an animal in any sort of stressful, like a dog or cat, whatever it would be. And as a filmmaker, I wanted to ask your opinion on that because it's really sad when you see Kong in a situation that he doesn't want to be in, right? And there's something about that aspect that hits you harder sometimes, like with an animal creature versus a human being. And I just wonder, like, as a filmmaker, you know, your human characters are great, but I just wonder in general, like, why do you think audiences feel that way sometimes?
You know, I think that, like, you know, I think you're definitely right. You definitely feel that whenever you're watching any movie and there's an animal. I mean, that's
dog.
Why,
Yeah.
I even feel bad just for the animals in the movie, just from a behind the scenes perspective. Like, oh, that poor dog, it has no idea it's in a movie, you know, it's told to do this stuff. I mean, I once had a scene, like, I hate insects. I think they're disgusting, you know, like, and so I can't even really look at insects for very long because they gross me out. And I remember I did a pilot once and I had to, it involved a cockroach in the opening scene. And there's this like close up of a cockroach. And I remember looking at this cockroach in the close-up, and I just felt like so scared for the cockroach, you know, like I was like, you know, I was like, don't hurt the cockroach. We have to be, you know, like, cause I was like, it doesn't know what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and like, it kind of like, even when I was looking at the close-up, I started like imprinting even more on the cockroach. I started realizing it was kind of cute, you know, and you know, so. You know,
you're right, though. I feel bad stepping on an ant sometimes. I feel guilty. Yeah.
Well, exactly. You know, so, you know, like, so there is this inherent thing about animals where we just feel protective to them, and the monsters are an extension of that because there's just purity to them, you know, like there's an innocence. You know, even to a giant monster like Kong, there's an innocence to him because he doesn't quite know what's going on all the time, you know, like he's reacting and he is this godlike entity, but at the same time, he is like a child. And, you know, like that's why like his relationship with the Gia character is so important because she's this innocent little kid. And, you know, that something about the purity between the two of them is what kind of helps their, you know, mythical connection kind of grow. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I'm terrified for animals anytime I see them in the movie. So.
Adam, my wife doesn't watch any of these movies, but she watched this one with me last night on the screener. And I can tell you like 3 or 4 times throughout the movie when things would happen to Kong and she'd be like, "Aw."
Well, you know what? Like my ex-girlfriend and I, when I was getting hired to do this film, we sat down and we watched 76 Kong, you know, and
Is that the Bridges one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen that since I was a kid. I actually really enjoyed rewatching it. I thought it held up pretty well, surprisingly. And it was a really funny thing because I never seen her emote to any movie. She wasn't even really that much of a film fan, you know, which is really kind of ironic, you know. And so after all these years of being together, like I'd never seen her like get emotional during a film, but until the ending of 76 Kong, where they're shooting Kong with the machine guns and blood is just it's very gratuitous, it's too gratuitous, honestly. And it was really interesting because I remember like I was feeling kind of emotional from it, and suddenly she goes, "Stop already! He's dead! Stop shooting him!" And I looked over and she had tears streaming down her face. And that was a big like moment for me because I was like, "Wow!" I was like, there's something about this character that it just really pulls at your heartstrings and it just hits you to your core. And that was a big lesson for me seeing something like that happen.
It's probably a reason why John Wick works so well, because like at the beginning of the film when the dog dies and then he goes out and kills all these people, like you're more worried about the dog that died than all the people that he's killing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can see him like headshot like 1 million people and it like
and honestly, I like as a dog owner, I look at that and I go, yeah, I get it. Like I probably do the same thing. Adam, I think we would be remiss if we didn't try to get some kind of face-off information from you. We're all massive face-off fans here. I think Kevin's probably about to pull one of his mini copies off the shelf. So the last we heard is that it's going to be more of a
masterpiece,
a sequel rather than a remake. So I guess the obvious question, I don't know if you're willing to answer, like, are you bringing Travolta and Cage back?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give anything away because it's still early.
It's just us talking.
No one's listening.
But to me, it's like, I've heard people talk about like, okay, what does he mean when he says a sequel? Like some people were saying like, okay, that he must just mean like it's a sequel in the Face-Off universe, using the surgery. Maybe it's peripherals in some ways. Like to me, Face-Off is not about the surgery. It's not about the world. It's about Sean Archer and Castor Troy.
Yes.
And these characters are what Face-Off is. Without them, you don't have Face-Off. And so that, to me, like that's what the film it's about. I won't say what that really means, but like that's the direction we're going in. Like it's about the characters. Like you can't. That's one thing I learned from doing the Blair Witch movie is that it didn't really connect as a sequel with people. Everybody just looked at it like a remake, even though we kind of just saw it as sort of like a fun sort of haunted house ride through the Blair Witch kind of world. Mm-hmm. We still saw it as a sequel, but because there's nothing that's really tying it into the first film, it just feels sort of like fan fiction a little bit to people, I think. And I still like that movie, but like it's like I get why it didn't really connect.
I actually think that film is genius. I'm not a massive fan of the original Blair, but your Blair Witch I think is like it scared the shit out of me.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. I actually rewatched it recently, and I had a good time with it, because I think it does some pretty clever things.
Yeah, that final act especially.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm very proud of the movie. I'm very proud of like all the movies I've done. But at the end of the day, I know why it didn't quite connect with the audiences in the way that it should have. And so that was a lesson I learned. I've learned a lot of lessons over the last few years in terms of like how to approach, kind of IP material. I mean, Death Note was another one where I went in the opposite direction, where I tried to do kind of my own thing with something that pre-existed. And, I think it rubbed people wrong because it was confusing to them. It was like, well, it's still the character names, but it's totally different, but it's supposed to be different, and it's kind of, like at the end of the day, you have to find a way to get to the heart of the source material, and you have to be true and you have to honor that. And it's a fine line that you're walking. And so Godzilla and Kong, I felt like was the first time that I kind of like, I nailed it. I got it right, and so with all those lessons going forward, it's like, I think it really helps Simon and I know what to do when we've been writing Face Off, and how to appropriately do it.
Quick follow up on the Face Off thing, because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen it like 47 times. That's not even a joke. Do you consider Castor's dying at the end of the? I mean, I know that it's John Woo's movie, but I guess have you talked to John Woo? And essentially, we think Castor dies at the end of the first one. So if we were making a sequel to Sean and Castor, is that were we to assume that Castor didn't die?
Well, isn't it weird whenever you look at the end of that film where you know the part where John Travolta takes the ring off of Castor Troy? You remember that part? They're in the ambulance together.
In the ambulance. Yes.
Well, did you notice that Castor Troy has a bandage? That the medic has bandaged his wound. Just take another look at that scene. You know, that's all.
Oh no! Oh wow! I'm gonna put that on tonight. I just always assumed Castor died.
Just check it out, you know.
Oh my God,
Right.
Adam, that's a great reference. I'm going to ask you another reference because we're around the same age. We grew up on the same films. I cannot watch any character pop their shoulder back in after it's been replaced and not think of Martin Riggs. Please tell me that you worked a Martin Riggs reference into Kong vs. Godzilla.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, there used to be more Lethal Weapon 2 references in the movie. Like Skarsgård used to actually have a monologue where he talked about Lethal Weapon 2, but we cut it out of the movie. You know, if you look at the end credits, there's still a reference, like, you know, like at the very end of the credits, it kind of mentions a lot of stuff that we had to give thanks for, like copyright reasons. And we actually have a thanks to or a credit to Lethal Weapon 2, and it's because and I can't remember if it's still in the film or if they just had to keep it in for whatever reason, but we had like his character used to Skarsgård's character used to drink out of a Lethal Weapon 2 mug in the movie, and we had to get the rights to Lethal. Actually, he used to also wear a Lethal Weapon 2 T-shirt, but it was like a Japanese Lethal Weapon 2, so you would only know what it said if you spoke Japanese or read Japanese. So yeah.
Did you cut a long sequence with Kong on a toilet with an explosive underneath him? Is that what it was?
That's for the next one. You know? No, I mean, like, you know, like I kind of saw
Does Kong say I'm too old for this shit at one point?
Well, you know, like he does in his own grunty way.
That's what he's emoting.
I always saw Kong as being sort of an 80s action hero. You know, there's obviously like some John McClane references within the movie, you know, like you know, so he is kind of like one of those guys.
That's awesome.
Well, Adam, we really appreciate your time today. It was a pleasure to have you on the Real Blend podcast. Thank you for talking filmmaking with us. We are very, very, very interested to see what you're going to do with Face Off. I'm very curious how that's going to pan out, but now I'm going to go back and watch that ambulance scene right now when I get off this call. So thank you so much for being on our show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
We want to thank Warner Brothers for hooking us up with that interview, and we want to start immediately where Adam sort of left us off, which is face-off conversation. And I love the fact that, Kev, you really carried that part of the interview by taking it the one step further and acknowledging that Castor Troy had died at the end of Face-Off, because I didn't remember that necessarily. And that was a really great way to get more information out of him without him having to give up much of anything. So I don't know about you, but I went back and watched that scene immediately after we finished having a conversation with him. Did you go back and watch it too?
I mean, I've seen the movie literally 47 times. Like, okay. I could tell you the whole scene. I could see it in my mind. I did not go back and watch it after the interview, to be honest. But I know it well enough to know where the bandages are, to what he looks like as he's sitting as Castor, or I'm sorry, as Archer is sitting in the ambulance at the end as Castor. But yes,
I forgot that they. Okay, so remind me then when this happens, because the clip that I watched had Nicolas Cage talking, but he was talking with John Travolta's voice.
Right. So, all right, you're talking about the ambulance scene specifically.
Yes. Yeah. But
so
when he's talking to Joan Allen, his wife, it's Nicolas Cage, and she calls him Archer, or she calls him Sean, and he's talking, and he has John Travolta's voice. Right,
because he's still. So at that point, if I remember correctly, at that point. So, yes. So, Nick Cage, the actor who's physically on screen, in the body is actually Sean Archer, John Travolta's character, and the voice is coming back.
Okay, that's what it is?
So basically, if you go back earlier in the film, when they were first switching faces, Travolta goes through that whole sequence where he does, he massages his throat and gets his voice ready to sound like Castor, and he's like, I could eat a peach for hours, and it's like, it's like scraggly or whatever, and then it turns into Castor's voice. So if you're referring to his voice sounding like Travolta within Castor's body, that's just because his voice is coming back, or somehow I don't remember the exact details
the technology that they used. I like that back when that happened, though, we were just okay with it. We were like, oh yeah, that works.
Yeah.
You could just massage his throat. So the bandage that I think Adam's discussing is when they put the two bodies side by side, and when Nicolas Cage reaches over to John Travolta's hand, take the ring off, Travolta's body has a very large bandage on the side that is there, I guess, deliberately, or at least these guys saw it and said, like, okay, that could mean that the medic got to him in time.
Right. Well, also the reason why he's all bandaged up is because, remember, like, he's basically going to go back into his. Or wait, I'm trying to remember how this is going to work. So in Archer's body, has Castor's face.
Yes.
So that are they then gonna?
I'm more confused than when we started.
Yeah. I don't know how they're gonna do that. That's gonna be interesting.
They jump forward because then the next time you see Archer, he looks like John Travolta again.
Right. And that was a reshoot, that whole scene.
Which I find very funny because apparently he's going through this really extensive surgery to get turned back into Sean Archer. And when he comes home, his wife is like at the table working on bills. Like she wouldn't be at the hospital, like waiting for him to come out of this massive surgery. I can imagine Michelle like getting massive surgery. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to wait home for her to come back. And he comes walking through the door with like flowers and kind of thing.
Well, she's better be glad she didn't have massive surgery on the day that Snyder Cut came out. Cause you'd be like, Michelle, it's Snyder Cut day. I'll get back to you.
I would have been pretty busy. I probably would have gone to go see her. All right. So anyway, face-off news.
The word probably was in that sentence.
I'm sorry, Gabe.
You might have been about to ask this. My question, he was very vague and deliberately vague about what all of that meant, his hints meant. But do you guys feel, even though maybe things aren't confirmed on the business end of it, that we are going to get the original cast back?
The fact that he's emphasizing that it's a sequel and not a reboot or a remake, to me implies that they have to be bringing them back because how can it be a sequel that anyone would want to make unless you're going to get otherwise have fun with it and pick two other guys that it would be fun to see them play each other.
One of the things that he said to us is that, it's too early to talk about any of this really. And what he then said in another interview the same day he was doing this is that those two guys have final script approval. Like, whatever they finish writing, those two have to sign off on.
Which means that they're going to read it. And why wouldn't they read it unless they were involved?
It sounds like they're interested.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to commit until these guys come back with whatever their script is.
What are the two of them doing that's so much better than Face On?
Yeah, but I mean, like, that is one of the movies that both of them probably don't want to mess with, right? Like... It's a legacy title. Yeah, it's a legacy title. You don't want to just come back for a.
But to Jake's point, like, when you look at the movies that the two of them are doing now, why would they not want to redo a Face-Off movie? Yeah.
Like, and honestly, like, if Jim Carrey's given us Dumb and Dumber 2 and Eddie Murphy has given us Coming to America, like, it seems like actors aren't really worried about their legacy films these days.
Interesting. All right, well, we'll take that.
And potentially, like, we could be getting Ace Ventura 3, I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
They're calling it Trace Ventura.
That's actually a great idea.
That was actually really good.
Wow,
that was really
done.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the WB's deal to strike a 45-day window from theatrical release to HBO Max starting next year. This is going to be in 2022. This is the resolution to the fact that this year, in order to get things stimulated, that films are going to HBO Max and theaters day and date. Now it sounds like the window is going to go back to 45 days. This is coming on news. Then we'll sort of pair it into the other one. Regal Cinemas is going to reopen, and they're aiming Kong versus Godzilla as their big return to theaters, and then with Mortal Kombat right behind it. All of this news has me feeling that we are close to things getting back to normal. But I'll say the Venom 2, and we weren't planning on talking about Venom, but like Venom moving out of June and back to September seemed a little hasty because they still have Black Widow and Fast 9 ahead of it. So I wasn't quite sure why they jumped. But where you guys stand, Kev, where do you stand on how you feel about us getting back to summer blockbusters amidst news that Regal is opening up in most places?
I still think that just in the, again, I don't want to jinx anything, but we're going in a more positive direction towards reopening certain things across the country. I truly believe that at some point this year, once vaccinations are more rolled out than they are now, that I think HBO Max, you think they're going to reverse that decision?
For the rest of the movies?
Yeah, like Dune and Matrix 4. And like, do you think they'll say, all right, you know what? Theaters seem to be in a good spot again. Why don't we jump back to this 45-day window? I guess the question is, legally speaking, if people signed up for HBO Max, how do you then justify that? I'm just because I feel like by the time we get to hopefully the end of the year, you would think that a film like Dune, but I guess at the same time they're opening in theaters and HBO Max, so you have the choice.
You do,
but I just don't know. I don't know. Do you think they'll reverse it?
I don't see them reversing it. Whereas I see someone like Denis looking at the calendar and saying, oh, in 2022 I can go full theatrical and get a 45-day window, push my release date back. I'm not going to hold.
Does he have the pull to do that?
He might. I think he might versus some others. You don't think, Jake? No. Okay, but what if he's getting the option for people to go to theaters though? So isn't that just as good?
I mean, that's the thing too. I think HBO's argument will be, look, like, yes, people have the option to watch it at home, but those are probably people that wouldn't have gone out to see it anyway. More theaters. It's not like it's not like it's getting the Wonder Woman 84 treatment where it's only open in a handful of theaters. Like hopefully by October, a majority of theaters around the country will be open, and people who want to and always intended on seeing it in theaters will do exactly that. I often use my parents as like the average American and how they feel, and they go to the movies maybe once a year. For like they're loving this HBO Max deal because they're getting to see a lot of movies at home that they would have waited until they were streaming at home anyway to see. With Dune, like, they probably were not going to go to the theaters to see it. So it's not like they're taking money out of Warner Brothers' pocket. They're just watching a movie that they wouldn't have gone to the movies to see anyway.
Sure. Yeah. To a lot of people, the theatrical component is not as important.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a microcosm of an example, but I think Tom and Jerry opening to $14 million the other weekend is really interesting. At a time where there weren't that many theaters open, and it was a kids movie available for kids to watch at home, it had one of the biggest openings of the pandemic. And I think I think Godzilla versus Kong is going to be very telling, and I think Mortal Kombat is going to be very telling.
I think Godzilla versus Kong, people will go. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%.
I have seen it, and I'm going to go out of my way to see it on a big screen because I honestly feel it warrants a big screen. That's all I can say. I can't review it right now. But
Do you guys think they'd also be less likely to reverse just because it looks like this year is still going to have a bit of a congestion problem with releases as they're getting backed up into the tail end of the year? And like, we don't even know necessarily when a full capacity opening is going to be a thing. Sure. So I could see that also being like, we might as well keep the goodwill of HBO Max and not try to cram more people into fewer screens.
But I also agree with Kevin. Is that a little kind of shady on their part to promote? They used a handful of movies to promote the idea of day and date releases for HBO Max and theatrical, and one of the big ones that they used, and their big hey, sign up for HBO Max thing, was Dune.
I don't think they reverse it. I think it's
I think the big movies that they claimed were going to be a part of that are going to be a part of that.
I think this announcement means that they got to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I think like
they get the HBO Max release this year, and then all of us who care about that are like, okay, next year we'll go back to quote unquote normal.
So Batman will have the 45-day theatrical window before going to it. But the fact that isn't that crazy? Like, Batman's only going to be out in theaters for 45 days before we can stream it at home.
That makes sense though. Like the window.
I think that's fair. We've talked about that. I think that's very fair.
The window before the pandemic felt archaic. It was 90. Longer than it needed to be. Yeah. 45 days. If you haven't seen a movie in 45 days, you're not going to go to the theater to see it.
Yeah.
And if we're at a point,
I don't think Batman would leave theaters in 45 days. Sure. I just think it would just have the additional HBO Max component. Yeah. I think, and I feel like I've said this all along. Like shorter windows are what we're going to have to agree to. There's going to have to be shorter windows. So if theaters and studios can come to an agreement that we can have a 45 or even 30 day, I even think 30 would be fair. And this is coming from somebody who's a major theater advocate. But that's why I always appreciated Netflix. And you got 2 weeks before the drop on Netflix for a major release, they'd put it in theaters to force the theatrical viewing. So in this particular instance, 30 to 45, as long as there is a specific theatrical window.
Yeah.
That's all I care about. Like every movie should be given the opportunity to play in theaters first.
A kind of a weird maybe effect of this. If the industry as a whole goes to like a 45-day window, if every studio does that, does that mean that the Avatar Avengers Endgame all-time box office is kind of stuck?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because like, how long did it take Avengers Endgame to break the record?
Really
they were doing it for months, right?
It was it was at least 2 months, if not even longer than that. So you're saying like nothing can really challenge it?
Or so to the rest of time, we're just going to be reporting on an Avatar and or Endgame re-release
exactly.
that's going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Well, but I was going to bring this up too because we're contractually obligated to bring up Nolan every episode.
Yes.
The idea that Tenet is
the opposite of an
like
NDA.
Going back to IMAX theaters is pretty intriguing because maybe without the glut of titles that are fighting for screen space, you have the ability to take advantage of like IMAX technology or films that really warrant the big screen and bring them back. So that like really diehard fans, that want to see Tenet on an IMAX screen, all of a sudden it's there. It used to be like you went to theaters, then you went to home video, and then everyone forgot about you. But if they now bring back these titles that really, like say a lot of people go see Matrix 4, and it's in 45-day window, it's back, it's available to stream, but everyone loves it. They're over the top for it. And then we get around to January and it's quiet, and the IMAX screens are like, let's put Matrix 4 back up there, and see if people come and do it. So maybe the rules are changing and stretching and bending in a way that it'll be a wild new industry. I don't know. I think we should just stay flexible, keep our minds open to what they can do, and just get people back in theaters. So opening Regal Cinemas is a big deal. April 2nd, it's going to open in the US. May in the UK, and again, that feels like we're turning the corner and getting ready for some exciting movies to be coming to theaters.
But also, too, not just that, it feels like we're turning a corner less apprehensively than we did last time. Because remember, like we had this conversation like around Tenet time last year where like theaters, I did live shots with like, theaters are back, guys, they're open, and look, Tenet's about to come out and we're doing this, and even that was sort of like, in the distance, we're like, yeah, but fall's coming around and we're talking about COVID ramping back up in the fall. This corner feels much more optimistic, much more light at the end of the tunnel, because we're turning the corner as vaccines are becoming much more accessible. People are open to the idea of safely going out and doing stuff, and it just feels better.
On a smaller note, but I think equally exciting for a lot of people listening to the show, Alamo Drafthouse just announced that they're going to be opening a new location in Texas. So just exciting from the standpoint of what people who are spending money on the industry are looking forward and seeing. And someone like Alamo Drafthouse that just filed for bankruptcy and all that stuff is still optimistic, opening a new location in a town, a second location in the same town. So,
and also just inside baseball, like Sean, you mentioned, like you got to see Godzilla versus Kong at a press screening on the big screen. I'm seeing Mortal Kombat in a few days on the big screen. Like the fact that like press screenings are coming back, and they're still providing the option. By no means are they saying you have to do it this way, but they're doing a very cool thing where they say like, look, if you feel safe, here's a screening. It like, granted, it's also very select movies. They offered us like nobody on the big screen. They offered us Godzilla versus Kong. They offered us Mortal Kombat. But then they also say, hey, you know what? If you're not there yet, cool, we'll give you a code, watch it at home.
Sure.
But that also feels very like turning a corner and we're there.
You know what I can't wait for? A junket we all fly to. And I know this is so inside baseball, but like I am so hungry for it.
Like those interviews are going to be the best interviews ever. It's going to be 4 minutes of us and the talent going, "How are you?"
You know what Sean will say when he gets to meet you guys at the airport?
What?
We fly now.
We do fly now.
I'm just going to be like holding Vin Diesel's hand as I sit across from him. This is family, isn't it, Vin? All right. Before we started the show, we were discussing Ann Sarnoff's comments. Ann Sarnoff is the Warner Media CEO. She had an interview ready to drop on Monday.
No joke.
Not even giving Zack Snyder a full week to celebrate the return of his release of Snyder Cut, a film that, by all standards, now we don't have numbers, and we may never have numbers, but that film, I think it's safe to say, dominated the conversation in a way that the fans kind of thought that they would have to do in order to make their case that he should continue to tell more movies in this realm, and that they should quote unquote restore the SnyderVerse. And Warner Media came out really quickly to say, congratulations, Zack, on completing your trilogy, and we'll be moving on from here. Which
even though every interview he has said that this is movie 3 of 5.
Yes, and in fact went so far as to like share details about where this was going to go.
Where did he share those details, Sean?
Well, on the Real Blend podcast, for starters, you should
Where
go
is
watch
that available?
30-minute interview on everywhere you can get podcast thingamabobs sold. Downloaded. Or you can watch us talk to Zack on YouTube. Kev, how shocked are you that Warner Brothers seems to be turning their back on a universe that I think a lot of fans want to see continue?
Well, it's sad, but one of the things I find interesting about this whole situation, and Snyder said this a lot in his interviews, is like, this movie wasn't even supposed to come out. You know what I mean? So like this version, this cut that we saw, Justice League, that came out on HBO Max. And like at the end of the day, it's hard for fans because that was a massive, massive success to get that film released in its true visionary format from Snyder.
Yeah.
But of course, we're going to watch that and want more. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, that's just the nature. We're human beings. We're going to want to see what he was going to continue. Am I surprised? No. Just based on how everything went down and the whole situation. At the end of the day, I'm more surprised that the cut got released. And I mean that in a good way, because it was awesome that the fans rose up and raised a bunch of money as well, and for a good cause, and really did everything. That the whole story behind the Snyder Cut release is just truly incredible. So am I surprised? No, because I think that at the end of the day, the behind the scenes on this story is just, there was a lot of things that went down. There's probably things that we don't even know went down. And so I think I will say this, leading up into the weekend, I was feeling a little more confident about the fact that maybe he might be able to finish these two films. It seemed like there was a great buzz around it. They could build momentum. They could make money off of this. But then Snyder told us, obviously, that the 2017 film is canon. His film's not. So it's almost as if, I don't know, I'm saddened that we're not going to be able to continue with his version. Does that mean it's definitively not going to happen? I don't think so. I mean, I think they're going to find a way somehow. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I don't know. We'll see.
I've been saying to the Snyder Cut kids this whole time to not lose focus of the fact that this movie you fought for is it's the prize. Like, that's crossing the finish line. And if it doesn't get to continue, don't let it diminish from the fact that you fought for this version that they were never going to release. Like, I get that it stings to hear right now, immediately after the fact, that they don't have any plans of moving forward, but they never had plans of moving forward. You know, right. Like, they had to concede to show you this version. They didn't want to. And Zack said on our podcast, like, they wanted to release it just as is. Like, whatever's on your laptop in that version, we'll just put that out. We don't want to sink any money into this. And so I know that it's tough to hear, but I don't think it was ever their intention to continue. And as much as I admire the campaign to release the Snyder Cut, I think it was much easier for the studio to release a cut that was 80 to 90% finished already.
Yeah. I have a question for you guys. If that's the case, and Warner Brothers never intended to and will never proceed past where the final frame of the Snyder Cut ends. Yeah. Do you wish he had not ended the film with as many cliffhangers as he did? Do you wish that he had sort of cut his losses and said, well, this isn't 3 of 5, this is 3 of 3, and just ended the story?
But the movie was always set up as an opener to the other two.
But he made adjustments to the film anyway. And so do you feel like if he genuinely believed that this is it, this is all it's going to be, do you genuinely believe that he should have just maybe trimmed off that little Return of the King epilogue? No? You're okay with the open-ended questions?
I am quite the opposite. I actually really
I'm not saying that I feel that way. I'm just sort of curious as to
I genuinely love that the version that exists is really him saying, this is my uncompromised part 3 of whatever would have been 5 pieces. And, you know, from here on out, he knows it's going to create speculation and conversation in his fan base of all the cool places that he could have gone. So I kind of do love that. And, you know, I don't think that we're out of the realm of possibility of him being able to continue it in some other format, like whether it's graphic novel or whether it's an animated feature or something. I just don't think Warner Media is ever going to give him the opportunity to do it live action.
So at the end of the day, the actual issue here is that Warner Media owns the rights to the characters, and they have to give him permission to do it, basically.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's the when it comes down to the legal reason why he wouldn't be able to continue. It's just that simple. It's just them not giving him it's not like Warner Brothers is going to sell their DC rights to a studio that Zack Snyder's then going to work with. You know what I mean? So it's like it's one of those situations where I don't know. Going into the weekend, I genuinely felt a buzz surrounding this, a positivity surrounding it that I was like, man, he's going to get to make those next 2 movies. I kept thinking he's putting all this out there so the fans can say we want this.
Yep.
And you just assume that it would, and then that interview drops on Monday, and it's like, whoa! It's like it was almost as if, like you said, like there was no plan to move forward. We got what we got, and at the end of the day, it's one of those weird things where, yes, I'm just so thankful we got what we got, and now we just have to accept the fact that they, at the moment, don't want to move forward. And as a fan, it's not fun, but I'm happy that we were able to get that cut, thankfully. The fact that we got it is just... You have to understand, that movie is out. It came out. It really happened. And I think what makes me sad, and I get it, because that news on Monday, to have that news right after the weekend is kind of a blow. But at the end of the day... The fact that it was even released to begin with blows my mind. We are a very want what we want and then move on society. Like we get what we want and then we move on from it and we want the next thing, the next big thing, the next big thing. Because we're, as a society, I feel like we've gotten more and more used to getting what we want in terms of movies and fan service and things like that. But at the end of the day, we have to step back from it, I think, and just say, I'm thankful we got that cut. That's where I'm trying to find a middle ground, because as much as I want to see him continue, and as much as I think it's ridiculous that they won't let him continue, considering the fan base that's surrounded this film and the number of people who watched the film and talked about it and trended it on social media, I think we have to take a step back and go, we got that cut.
It's like begging
win.
someone to go on a date with you, and they finally concede and say, yes, I'll go on a date. And when the date's over, they say, look, had a great time, but I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do it. Okay. I appreciate you going out with me. Appreciate you giving me a shot, but we're not going to get married.
I don't even know if the word allowed is the right word, but the fact that they even allowed it to happen is just astounding to me. And they gave him $70 million. Yeah. Right.
And there's no good time for them to say we're not going to keep going. If they say it on Monday morning, it's why couldn't you let us enjoy the fact that we got this? If they waited 2 weeks, the fan base would say, why didn't you tell us right away? How come you let us keep our hopes up for 2 weeks? It's a lose-lose situation for everybody. Nobody wants to hear this news.
I will say it does feel like no matter what happened over the weekend, whether a billion people watched it, I agree with you in that that statement seemed ready to go. Which is.
Sorry, in hindsight, though, shouldn't we that have been the expectation, given the fact that they have a new Batman? They have a Batman TV series that's set in the new Batman's world. They have a Flash movie that we know is...
But we're going to get another Flash movie. We're going to get another Aquaman movie. We're going to get another
But this movie isn't DCEU, though. Those movies are.
That's so stupid.
Which is really weird. So all right, so hold on. What is technically DCEU at this moment? So
everything but
Man of Steel,
really.
BVS, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman 1 and 2... Flash will be DCEU.
That's the hill they want to die on?
Yeah.
I mean, we got Man of Steel.
Because in their mind, the universe has moved on from Zack's 2017 movie.
Right. But then why not let... So I saw this on Twitter. Why not let Snyder just continue his out of DCU universe?
Well, because
our audiences are smart enough to know the difference. If we're smart enough to exist in a world where we can have Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson be Batman all at the same time, Like, we understand. Like, we get different, like, directions. Like, it doesn't all have to be one narrative anymore.
I get it. I mean, these movies cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's almost like, okay, all right, so would Snyder...
You're talking $200 million. You're talking $200 million.
That's minimum before you even promote it. You're talking $500 million to get it into theaters and get people aware that it
Justice
exists.
League is a monster.
Them $13 a month, Gabe.
True.
Well, no, I mean, and that's the thing you have to also understand is that by the time a Justice League 2 or 3 came out, we hopefully won't be in a situation where HBO Max is the only place releasing it. You would hope that it would be a global, because I mean this
still.
I mean, and also I want to shout out HBO Max for releasing this thing because they that's a really big deal. But at the end of the day, by the time a second or third Justice League came out, you would need a theatrical component to justify the hundreds of millions of dollars you're spending, because like you said, his cut was already basically done. He just needed the other 70 million or whatever it was to shoot that last scene, finish the visual effects, make Steppenwolf awesome. Which, by the way, I'd love to get into that at some point about how great of a villain he was in this cut of the film. But anyways, it just doesn't seem financially possible unless Warner Brothers is like, we will let you continue. Now, is there any way? I know we have to move on. Is there any possible way Warner Brothers could ever say, oh, you know what? All right, your movie is now canon. Joss's is not. Let's continue. Can you reverse that, or is it done?
Sure. No.
You can reverse canon talk. You can reverse canon decisions.
I think anything can be done. It just feels like the executives who are in charge at the moment are not into Zack's vision.
Is Batman this year or next year?
Next year.
If Batman comes out and everyone hates it, then maybe they're like, listen, Zack.
We're not going to hate it. You know, it's gonna
no, it looks great. It looks awesome.
It looks phenomenal. But
Matt Reeves took a page out of Snyder's book. It's dark. It's grim. It looks like
a Fincher movie.
Snyder Fincher movie. Yeah, it's like it's. I'm sad, but you have to remember. Think about where you were a year ago, when this movie wasn't even a possibility of being released, and now we're sitting here and it's out. Just focus on that positive energy, I think.
Normally, news like this breaks right after we've finished recording. But I'm pleased to announce that we have some breaking massive news. And I see some stuff down below, but you guys have been tracking the tweets while we've been talking. Apparently, Black Widow is moving back. It is now going to be opening July 9th instead of May, 7th, I want to say. It was first weekend in May. It is going to be available in theaters, but also on Disney Plus Premiere, which means it's going to be that $30 rental. In addition to Black Widow moving back, did you guys say Shang-Chi moved back also? September?
Shang-Chi moved up. Wait, when was Shang-Chi supposed to come out?
July.
Oh, then yeah, but it moved back.
Okay, so Black Widow moved to July 9th. Yeah. Shang-Chi moved to September. Did Eternals move?
For the big news I saw, because basically Disney just blew up their entire schedule, which is the news that we're getting. Luca, the new Pixar film, is going to be a Disney Plus exclusive. It's not going to theaters.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like Soul. How come Pixar's becoming the redheaded stepchild? Why are they getting theatrical
Because
releases?
there's not a number 2 after it.
Why would they not give Luca at least a theatrical run in simultaneous?
Cruella's also getting the theaters and Disney Plus treatment.
Oh, it's getting both. No kidding.
Yeah, just like Black Widow.
That's just on Emma Stone alone. It's just the fact that she's in that movie.
So, but it feels weird that like they would do that for Cruella and they do it for Black Widow. But Luca, they're not doing it for.
Did Soul didn't get a theatrical release either, did it?
No, it did not.
That's crazy.
Just
the family movies, though, I think have proven in the last year to be
successful on their own.
But Raya is theaters and home. Raya got theaters.
Great. Well, maybe they saw those numbers, whatever they were, and they said not.
But it's going to be a different world by the time Luca comes out.
But I mean, you got to make that decision now, right?
Is Luca based on the director of Call Me by Your Name?
I don't know. That looks very similar to that. It looks very similar to that.
The director's name of Call Me by Your Name is Luca. I was just making a joke.
I was going to go with the Dallas Mavericks joke, but you guys don't watch NBA, unfortunately. Wait, did Spider-Man get moved?
They canceled it. It's never coming out.
Well, that's Sony, right?
Yes, it is, but it's tied into the Marvel tapestry, so I'm just worried about them moving Spider-Man back. I don't want.
Yeah, but that's Sony, right?
Will you guys... Yes, it's Sony. Will you guys... Well, you guys will go to theaters. I was going to ask, would you pay money to see Black Widow on Disney Premiere?
I would go to... No, at this point... Honestly, at this point, you could project a phone book onto the big screen and I'd pay to go see it.
All right, that's big news. Black Widow moving back.
And you guys know how little I care about.
So Black Widow gets a simultaneous premium and then theatrical.
And theaters. But July. Now they're saying July.
Yeah. But Cruella is going to be end of May, they're still saying.
Oh, it is? Okay. Yeah.
How do we measure box office for a movie like Black Widow?
I don't know. Gabe brings up a really interesting point, which is like, is our measurement of are we, because also, you know, and we've talked extensively about how I distrust the numbers that we get from streaming services. Are we about to enter into a world where we really don't know how well a movie does anymore?
Yeah, maybe.
How did Snyder's movie do?
No one knows.
I don't know if we're ever going to know, because I think that if HBO Max comes out and says, oh, it was a massive success, then the narrative is going to be, well, then why don't you move forward with the SnyderVerse? And no company is ever going to come out and say that thing we did was an absolute failure. So I don't think we're ever going to know what, because also too, you know, after Marvel, because remember when, what was it? It was Wonder Woman came out, and then Marvel also had something, and
Soul.
It was like around Soul. And they were like almost competing as to like which one had the bigger numbers. And they both released their numbers within a very short amount of time with each other. Falcon and Winter Soldier just came out and said it was the biggest streaming premiere in Disney Plus history. And then
Disney Plus history.
In all
puts it in the top like
storied.
Yeah,
still
you know
makes
what
for
it
a
is?
good headline.
You guys remember when Steamboat Willie premiered on Disney Plus?
The success of a streaming service, I think, boils down to subscriptions. More than it does, like, how many subscribers are you bringing on board for it? Because that's where they're making their money.
Well, that's the whole game, yeah.
You also can't get the metrics on a streaming thing, because what if somebody plays Snyder Cut for half an hour and then bails out on it? It's a 4-hour film.
That's always been my... That's always,
is that a success?
Well, Netflix has gone on record saying that they count it as 2 minutes. If you watch it for 2 minutes, that's a viewership.
So what do those numbers mean? Those numbers don't mean anything. And
that's why I say that they mean nothing. They're arbitrary. But and to me, it's different than when people say, oh, like, you could pay to see a movie and walk out after 2 minutes. But what's the likelihood of that? The likelihood of someone paying $15 to go see a movie and walking out is far less than someone bailing out after 2 minutes of realizing that they don't like a movie.
So theoretically, in a world of box office, theoretically speaking, from Disney's perspective, theoretically, what you could do is you put the $30 that goes to the premium access as box office. So yes. I think that's how it would work. I mean, this is my guess. So the movie opens in theaters. You get your numbers there. Let's say it does 50 million in its first weekend. And then let's say the streaming service puts up another 30 or 40 million. There's an $80-90 million weekend. I don't see why that would not make sense. I mean, I feel like it makes sense. But the problem is less people. The only issue with that is that when you pay the $30, 10 people in your house could watch it. You know what I mean? And so you're not getting the individual ticket price. But I think that
only works with a premiere access. Yeah. If it's HBO Max day and date, it's just part of your subscription. There's no numbers. But I've said this before. I do want to point out, I think because for us, we love talking about the numbers, and that's the news, and that's the narrative we build around films are box office numbers. But filmmakers have said time and time again that they love making movies for Netflix because they don't have to wait and pull their hair out opening weekend, quote unquote, and see if it's a success or not the first day it's out because it got this number versus that number. Netflix just says, did great, and they're like, okay, cool, Netflix is happy. I don't have to stress about that as a filmmaker. And if a filmmaker's happy, I'm hard pressed not to support that.
But I guess when they somewhere, there's going to be a number attached to it. Like someone somewhere. Like we work in news. We might not broadcast to our viewers what our ratings are every day. Like, it might not be a thing where, like, and honestly, I don't even really know what our ratings are. I don't wake up every morning and stress about what the ratings are the day before. But I guarantee you, there's someone at my station that knows what they are, and they are altering future decisions based on things. So, like, you can't super say that, like, that the narrative's not there and that decisions aren't being made based on the numerical success of these things, because it might not be as public. But someone somewhere around a boardroom table is making a decision based on numbers.
Netflix's kind of stated model is that they just need subscribers who are there to feel like their subscription is still valuable, and enough interest so that people who aren't subscribed, which is almost, I mean, they've almost capped what they're going to be able to get essentially, will come on board. It doesn't really matter what it is or why it is. They just need enough buzz around their product so that people hit subscribe. So it's hard to tie that to a single title, I think, in general.
I
But I mean, I guess when they spend $200-something million or whatever the budget was on 6 Underground, are they making money on that?
I don't think they've made money ever.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though? Like,
I think they're still working on debt, to be honest.
If they gave, whatever the budget was for that movie, I mean, I know it did well, I guess, from the numbers that we saw, but did it do well? Like, in the sense of, like, did they make money on that movie? Like, and The Gray Man, the Russo brothers' brand new movie with Chris Evans and Ryan Gosling and Regé-Jean Page from Bridgerton, that's apparently the most expensive movie Netflix has ever made.
No kidding.
How are they going to gauge how successful it is?
Yeah, I don't know, because to me, there's so many ancillary sides that have to come into, like, part of the reason why superhero movies are so successful, and part of the reason why the Snyder ones are not as successful, is because they thrive on other avenues like toy sales. And, other merchandise that goes with it. And kids aren't snatching up, the Ben Affleck's Batman on a T-shirt.
I mean, don't forget, I mean, that Tim Burton's Batman series was derailed because of McDonald's Happy Meals. Like, McDonald's looked at that movie and went, we can't make freaking Happy Meals out of a penguin that rips off somebody's nose.
But how'd they promote Dark Knight then with toys and stuff like that?
Did they?
Well,
did they do Dark Knight Happy Meals?
No, they didn't. No.
Yeah.
No.
You can't do give a kid an action figure for Joker. I mean, you just can't do that.
9 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, that's what's driving the decision. On the 10th example, it's Nolan giving you one of the best superhero movies ever created. But for the most part, they're making those decisions. But like a film like 6 Underground it didn't have a blip on the radar. Like, no one talked about it at all.
Yeah.
I think more people talk about Extraction, the Chris Hemsworth movie. That at least had some legs to it. People discussed it, but I just don't know how to gauge success on these.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Titles.
Like 6 Underground was, where'd all that money go? Like, I'm just trying to understand, like, and they're spending that much money on a lot of films. Like, you know how much The Crown costs to make? Now,
The Crown, to their defense, they're the Kleenex of streaming services.
What do you mean?
They're Netflix. They're Netflix. Netflix is the example you say when you're talking about streaming. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that was the business model, was if we become Coca-Cola of streaming's here forever, we will make billions of dollars however many years down the road.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think anybody will ever be like Blockbuster and Netflix like that. They'll always be the leader in that terminology when it comes to streaming.
Or honestly, at this point, you could argue Apple's done the same. Did you ever hear that story that Microsoft got so pissed because they paid millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to be the supplier for tablets for coaches and defensive coordinators and stuff on sidelines and football games, and the commentators would make comments like, oh, you see the coach over there with his iPad getting this and this and this. And Microsoft is like, what the hell? Like, we're paying millions of dollars to be like your tablet, and your commentators are calling it iPads.
That's funny.
That's what, when you transition into the definitive, like Band-Aid for a long time, I didn't realize that was a name brand. I
didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Like, I know Jacuzzi is. Like, I know Jacuzzi is a name brand of a hot tub, and people.
Wait, is Jacuzzi not as a name brand?
That's funny.
I always call that thing a jacuzzi, or I always call that thing a Band-Aid.
Like pretty soon, people are going to be like, what are you listening to? And they're going to be like, I'm listening to a real blend. Like, it's just going to be, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between.
That's the podcast. Well, look at Google. Like, Google is a verb, you know?
Google, just Google it. Yeah, the thing is that I don't like say, let me Google it and go to like Ask Jeeves.
AirBuds is almost becoming its own thing too.
Yeah,
like,
put in your AirPods.
AirPods, sorry. Yeah. Like, people say AirPods. Like put your AirPods in, even though
I call them AirBuds too all the time.
That's a dog that plays basketball.
Remember what was the sequel? The sequel to that movie had a great title. It was a golden retriever or whatever it was. Like, it was like
Golden Receiver. It was the
Golden
football
Receiver.
one.
That's what it was.
Golden Receiver.
Golden Receiver.
Yeah. We went a direction I did not expect us to go.
Golden Receiver.
Golden Receiver. Yeah,
that was a great title. I thought that was such a brilliant play on that. Because it was like, remember the poster was like, it was like a football movie, like a football. Yeah. It was,
they made one for every sport essentially.
Golden Receiver.
There's a whole slew of those AirPod titles. All right, let's move on to this weekend movies. Gabe wants us to rave about a new series coming to Amazon Prime Video by Robert Kirkman, who everyone kind of knows from The Walking Dead, but he has a comic book series called Invincible that is getting an animated adaptation. Gabe, tell us why we should care.
You shouldn't know anything going into it. It's one of those. All I will say is it's superhero related. It's about a kid getting his powers. His dad's essentially Superman in this universe. And it is one of the coolest stories I've ever read. Stories. I'm not qualifying that with superhero. It's one of the coolest stories I've ever read. It's one of the most interesting and fresh superhero stories I've ever read. And it was like I read like the first issue and fell in love with it. The cast is amazing. It's Robert Kirkman, who is I think is super creative. So don't miss this one. Check it out.
Okay.
That's Amazon?
Amazon Prime, yeah. Prime Video.
And
I saw a few people doing the junket, but I turned them down after I didn't get invited.
Who saw Nobody?
I did.
Kev, tell us about Nobody.
This is David. It's David Leitch. So it's he produced it. This is like essentially in that John Wick, Atomic Blonde style of filmmaking. Leitch didn't direct it, but Leitch is a producer on it, and Leitch obviously co-directed first John Wick, and then him and Stelhesky went on. I think Stelhesky went on to do 2, and then Leitch did Atomic Blonde. So it's very much in that brand. Odenkirk is great in it because he's such an unassuming badass, but a realistic badass, like in the sense of like. What I appreciated about the film is that you actually see him get hurt. And I think that happened with John Wick too, where like they don't make an action scene where he kills or beats up like 10 people. He doesn't walk away feeling like he just had like the greatest workout of his life. He walks away beaten up, bruised, beaten down. That bus scene that's in the trailer, I mean, he takes a big beating in that scene. And like, to me, it just added a sense of realism and grounded element to. That's what it would be like to see this guy in this situation. Like, I don't believe he's on some superhero level. He is a human being who has training. And Odenkirk is not, even he'll even say this. He said this in my interview. It's not like, when you look at Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron, you can see the action star. And he says, like, for me, I don't know if you necessarily see it. But in the sense of like, he is playing like an ordinary guy who just happens to be in an extraordinary situation that he did have training in the past. He's now has a family, wants to move on. It gets brought back through him, essentially.
Is there a good reason for bringing it back?
He protects a bystander on the bus, and the people he beats up end up being part of a bigger villain picture, and that kind of lures him back into that. Because basically someone breaks into his house in the beginning of the film, and that's all tied to the storyline specifically. Like, and he doesn't, like, at one point during the break-in, which is in the trailer, he has the opportunity to probably beat the crap out of all the people who broke into his house, but he decides to restrain himself and not do it because basically you put yourself on the map if you do something hard, like if you do something like that. But even in self-defense, people would question, oh, how did you even do that? What training did you have in the past? So he kind of keeps it hidden, almost like Superman not saving his father's life in Man of Steel. He does it to hide his powers.
Does he work at a Cinnabon and they shoot it in black and white?
They shoot it in black and white, and then it takes, and you're just waiting for Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul to show up the whole time.
I understand that reference because I watched the show.
Yes,
because I fulfilled my end of the bargain.
Is it? It's just theaters, right?
Yes, only theaters. Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that they're only doing it in theaters. It's really cool.
It's coming to PVOD in a few weeks, right?
I think. Well, isn't that Universal's deal? It's like 17 days,
and then 17 days.
Yeah, which is another great way to look at the shorter windows, and again, give the theatrical the initial run. I mean, again, I keep lowering my days here from 45 to 30 to 17, but as long as you get that theatrical run initially, I don't care how long it takes. Just give it a week or two. 17 days is perfect, actually.
All right, this week's blend game. We chose the films of Antoine Fuqua, and try as I might, I could not come up with anything besides Training Day. So I went Training Day, And
wait, I thought we said we weren't. We all agreed we weren't doing Training Day.
Oh, did we say that?
You could pick Training Day, but you had to have a second to at least discuss, so we could diversify our.
Okay.
So what would be your number 2? We can still discuss Training Day because we don't need to gloss over a great film. But
I think Training Day across the board. I think we probably even did this when we did Denzel somewhat recently.
Yes,
because we talked. Because you guys,
at least 2 of you did. I think at least 2 of you did.
Pick Training Day, and it's just it's hard with Antoine Fuqua because I feel like in a way we talked about this with Tarantino. You know, when you come out the gate with something early in your career that's as good as that is, you're always going to be sort of competing with that or chasing it to a certain degree. And I'm not quite sure that he is going to ever make a film that's just that good. Everything clicked for that film in particular. If I had to go to another one, I'd go to The Equalizer. And I liked The Equalizer a lot more than I thought I was going to. You know, remake of an old television show, just had a pretty good concept. But I love the fact that Antoine Fuqua has just found sort of his muse in Denzel. And he brings out the weight that Denzel can bring to a role. The drama and the life lived. Denzel can do that so well. And I will also hold on to Equalizer because it's one of my most favorite junket experiences when I got to interview Denzel and Antoine Fuqua together. And I asked the right question to start off the day, which was just that movie takes place in the finale of it takes place in a Home Depot type warehouse. And Denzel's character sets off the fire alarms, so it's raining down on them the whole time, which is a great stylistic choice. And I said, but Denzel, that must have been pretty awful to film. And he told this amazing story about just like how much he hated Antoine Fuqua. Like on the first day it made sense, but after 18 hours of filming it and then having to film it for multiple days, and he just did it in like the greatest Denzel, and Antoine Fuqua was dying laughing, and it'll always go down as one of my favorite sort of junket memories because I just knew I'd asked something that people weren't asking, and it triggered some really great stories. So selfishly, for that reason, I'm going to pick Equalizer for.
There are some people. I feel like junket people always say that like the laughter bar that you want to get as an interviewer is Julia Roberts, and she obviously has a great laugh. She has a famous laugh. But I'm with you, Sean, and that like I think there's nothing better than because when you interview Denzel, if you can get a Denzel laugh, like it's 0 or 10. When that dude laughs, he laughs big, and you know it, and everyone in the hallway knows it. Like, it's such a great moment. And honestly, like, coming from him, it's such a great feeling. And, I'm with, like, there's nothing better in an interview than a Denzel. To me, my, like, laughter bar is a Denzel Washington laugh.
That's a good one. All right, what's your choice, then, for Antoine?
Well, aside from Training Day, because I agree with you in that, like, Training Day is also... people don't appreciate how meticulously crafted that movie is. Like, there are lines that are said in the distance by characters that have implications. There's one moment where, like, the focus is on Jake, is on Ethan Hawke, and Alonzo is in the background, casually on the phone, and you hear him very softly say to someone on the phone, "Get the bathtub ready." And then obviously you end up seeing Jake in the bathtub with a shotgun in his face screaming, "I have a little girl." So like just the ridiculous, like him grabbing the Chinese food menu in the opening scene off of his car windshield and then using it as the warrant later on. There's so many little moments that are just beautiful. Antoine Fuqua, the year before Training Day, maybe 2 years before, did a movie with Jamie Foxx and David Morse called Bait. And I love that movie. It is basically a pristine thief steals like millions of dollars worth of gold. And there is a reason that they think that Jamie Foxx bumped into this guy and that somehow Jamie Foxx might inadvertently know where the gold is. So David Morse runs this kind of CIA spying operative. And this was at a time where like the idea of like there being cameras on every corner was still kind of a new, oh my God, are they watching us kind of idea? And so it's all basically they start using Jamie Foxx and putting him, without him knowing it, into dangerous, precarious positions to attract this gold thief by making him believe that Jamie Foxx knows where the gold is or has the gold. It's a really fun movie. It's still when it was before Jamie Foxx really kind of started venturing into drama, so he was still really fun comedic Jamie Foxx. He's got some, I think David Morse is a truly underrated actor, and he's got some really fun moments with David Morse. It has a surprisingly great score, like a weirdly great score. I remember like even thinking like the score for this movie is so much better than it has any right to be. It's a really fun movie. 21 years later, it's probably a little dated because the entire focus is technology that we kind of all assume is now part of our reality now, but at the time was very much kind of on the cusp of like, wait, is this actually a thing? But if you've never seen the movie Bait, I think it might be Antoine Fuqua's like feature directorial debut. It's really a great movie. I was leaning toward Olympus Has Fallen for a second, but I eventually had to go with Bait just because it's so much fun, and I remember loving it as a kid, and I rewatched it a few years ago. And aside from like the idea of the technology being a little dated, it's still very fun.
Very cool. I never even heard of it. Kev, what did you pick?
I went with Olympus Has Fallen, and I rewatched that recently, which it's awesome. I know it's Die Hard in the White House, but it's so much fun. It's extremely well done from an action perspective, and I thought that Gerard Butler was great. It's a pretty terrifying film if you think about it. It's very, very violent. That whole sequence in the bunker with Aaron Eckhart and Melissa Leo as they're trying to get the numbers out of them for the codes for whatever the nuclear launch would be. Just a really I thought at the end of the day, that movie is like a very over-the-top explosive action film that actually has grounded realism to the consequences of what would happen if that actually went down. And one of the things I always find fascinating about movies like that is they're like, do you ever wonder when you watch those, like, wait, are they giving people ideas on how to do these things? Like they're like, it's so specifically planned out and like exacting and like, here's how they're doing it. And I'm like, and I guess what they have to do, I would love to ask Antoine Fuqua this. When you do a movie like that and when you're basically breaking in and taking over the White House, do you have to clear it with like security to
that's
say,
interesting.
that's a little too... That's a little too realistic, or whatever it is. Like, is this going to give somebody the wrong idea? And I always like every time I watch the Olympus Has Fallen, I'm like it just seems as if like they found like the movie finds a way to make you believe
like Ocean's
they
11.
can do
like
it.
Ocean's 11 makes it makes it feel like we could all go rob a casino in Vegas.
Right. And so, like, I would have to imagine that before putting out something like that, because I mean, you're dealing with the whole Camp David. Doesn't he go to Camp David in the beginning? And there's like it's all like it doesn't, because that's how the wife dies off of the bridge in the snowy limo scene, and like, and it's just like it just seems. They built in so much of what we know and about our world that it always, those types of movies always fascinate me. I'm always like, wait, is somebody gonna like learn how to do something bad by watching these movies? But no,
we saw that movie together, you and I, in New York.
Yeah, we did. Olympus Has Fallen is, I think, an underrated action film.
And
London Has Fallen was terrible.
I would say that was the summer that two White House invasion movies were coming out, and and the other one was Roland Emmerich, and I don't know about you, I kind of assumed the other one was going to be better, and ended up White House Down sucked, and Olympus Has Fallen was awesome. That's a great pick,
and it's rated R. It's brutal. It's like it's unapologetically an R-rated action film. Like, it's just genuinely awesome. Like, I think if people revisit it, I don't. Some of the CGI doesn't hold up as well, especially when they're flying. Like some of the characters are flying over the monument, and you see the monument topple. But like some of that CGI is a little dated. But overall, I thought it's a really, really well paced and just intriguing action movie. And I also think Gerard Butler's great in the movie. I actually think he gives a great performance. I think his dedication to the president is believable, and it's just an awesome film.
I wanted to go back. That's a great pick. I wanted to go back to Jake's pick, though, because you mentioned the music. I love Bait. I grew up watching Bait.
Yes!
And you mentioned the music, and I was like, who did that? It was Mark Mancina, who, if you don't know, he was the composer for Speed, for Bad Boys.
Johnson has a great
for Twisters, for Con Air, for Speed 2, for Bait, for Training Day, there was a couple other ones. He did August Rush, Shooter, which is a Fuqua, another great Fuqua movie. And then he did the original score composed by, is the official credit, on Moana.
Wait, was August Rush the Joseph Gordon-Levitt bicycle movie?
No, you're thinking Premium Rush.
No, the August Rush was the with the kid with the guitar.
Yeah, the kid that plays guitar is August
Premium Rush. I forgot about that.
Not to be confused with Rush.
He and Michael Shannon were like opposing
I
bicycle messenger guys or some such.
Anyway, what a great resume.
I want to seek that out. All right, audience picks for Antoine Fuqua. Michelle Garris said The Magnificent Seven. I know it's a remake of a remake of a remake, but it's so much fun to watch. Gregory Voigt also picked Magnificent Seven. Michael Breen, Josh Kiemig, and many, many others went Training Day. Ross Cordnell said Southpaw, and there was also some love for his version of
great, by the
King
way, with Jake
Arthur.
Gyllenhaal. That was great.
And Rachel McAdams. Always gets points for Rachel McAdams. For next week's Blend game, we will be playing hashtag. I can't believe we haven't done this one before. Feels like we've done this one. No? Hashtag Kate Winslet Blend. Have we played Kate Winslet Blend? No, we haven't, because that's weird to say. Kate Winslet Blend.
I feel like
know your pick.
Gabe is the real Blend historian. He's got a pretty good idea about what we have and have not done.
All right. Well, we're diving into the work of Kate Winslet.
Historian or guy with a spreadsheet,
Let us know your picks
Historians
via
have
email.
spreadsheets.
realblend@cinemablend.com, or you can use social media hashtag Kate Winslet Blend. At that website, you can also send us reviews. We do not have a review this week, but make sure you head over to Apple Podcast, drop us a fun review, and we will read it on the show. Well, we're not doing good enough, apparently, Jake. Not enough to inspire the masses. We got to step up our game.
My shoulders hurt from carrying this show all week.
On our next premium episode, it's a mailbag episode.
Hey, mailbag! Do we have questions?
It's always very fun. You can access premium episodes by doing a $5 a month subscription, and you can go to premium to access that at bit.ly/realblendpremium. And in the meantime, follow us on social media. We'll be back next week with a full-on show, some pretty exciting guests on the radar, in the hopper, hashtag if it happens. Follow us at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, and at Sean_O'Connell. Go check out the Zack Snyder interview if you guys missed it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's interview with Adam Wingard. And until next week.
We forgot to ask Zack Snyder if he watched Hubie.
No, but we did ask him if he watched Tenet, and everyone was like, can't believe you guys asked him if he watched Tenet. I was like, well, Nolan's his producer. Like, that, we can just pull it out of left. We're not just asking people if they watched Tenet.
That would be like someone asking me if I've read your book. Like, that's a legitimate question.
Oh, yeah. Dude, you made me laugh so hard with that joke on social media that I just text you a link to buy my book. Because there's some truth to that. Like, I feel like that's something I would do. Because I'm a whore, like we've said.
Hubie!
Like you told Zack Snyder.